The Weissr Asset Strategy tool will increase your company's cash flow by 20 to 100% simply by allocating capital in a significantly better way. The Weissr Asset Strategy tool will allocate capital in ways you've never thought of. Today, your capital budgeting process chases short payback projects with high NPV or IRR, but that leads to lowered company cash flow, even if assumptions aren't realized. We explain this in our text, "The Tail Wags the Dog." This video will present the basics behind this new way of allocating capital in an industrial company. For 25 years, we have worked for some of the largest capital-intensive companies in the world. And the Weissr tool incorporates basically all the methods, processes, and productivity that we have developed regarding CapExes and strategy. The companies who use this tool today have a process for using it, connected to their ordinary capital budgeting process. It is also used in specific situations, such as mergers and acquisitions, sudden demand and/or price declines, conversion needs, large CapEx situations, etc., dramatically increasing the speed and quality of conclusions as well as management consensus. The Weissr Asset Strategy tool is the strategy tool for all industrial companies with assets. It will change your company. It brings a completely new way of prioritizing CapEx decisions. You will obtain a significantly better list of decisions in terms of cash flow generation. In addition, the list of decisions will make a whole lot more sense. Now, this is how the process works. First, you develop a base alternative. A base alternative needs to follow certain rules. Pause now if you want to read them. It is a going concern, as is alternative. There is no strategic intent. Assume that each plant or mill produces today's product mix, serving today's customers, but consider market demand changes for the future. Your current capacities must remain unchanged, no matter where markets are heading. The future, 15 to 30 years, CapEx need has to be identified, and it must consider not only wear and tear and future environmental safety standards, but also creep in customer expectations regarding quality. The base alternative does not develop itself compared to competition, so there will be a slight EBITDA margin decline in the future assumptions. The base alternative may not be a realistic alternative, but is rather more an analytical starting point for the work to come. All mills are treated the same here. All this is developed in a spreadsheet environment with logs and cells. The model as such is locked and cannot be changed, and the users are assigned their tasks. All assumptions are presented in tables where plants are compared and outcomes are presented in various cash flow charts. After having set the base alternative, you need to develop a long list of so-called strategic building blocks or SBBs. These are built from the base alternative. You want a large library of SBBs, at least 5 to 10 for every mill you have. These are often tactical opportunities such as debottleneckings or closures. But we call them strategic because they should be rather large decisions. A strategic building block's changes made against the base alternative are detected and highlighted in the model, and all changes are logged, users, data, etc. Graphs and tables illustrating the outcome are immediately available. A strategic building block can be debottlenecking, speed up CapEx for more capacity. We are mainly looking for the really large ones, not the ones providing you with another 1 to 2%. 10 to 100% is often a good goal, and more than one mill if steps in capacity exists. At this stage, do not worry about it costing a lot. Building blocks here must include the new capacity, fixed and variable cost changes, the CapEx, avoided future CapExes due to the capital spent now instead, and so on. Plant closures. You should take each plant and shut it. If you have 10 plants, you will then have 10 shutdown SBBs. Each SBB will then shut down one plant and keep the others running. At this stage, do not think this plant is too good or important to be closed. All plants should go through this. Building blocks here must include severance payments, environmental closure costs, and other closure costs such as breaching contracts, etc. Line closures. If you have more than one production line in a plant, you should develop one shutdown case for each line. If you have 3 production lines in a certain plant, you should have 3 line closure SBBs for this plant. Building blocks here must include fixed and variable cost reductions, avoided capital in the remaining mill, etc. Capabilities. You should then develop SBBs for relevant additions of capabilities in a mill, to invest for enhanced or added product capabilities. Building blocks here must include the CapEx, fixed and variable cost changes, avoided future CapExes due to the capital spent now instead, etc. Conversions. If necessary, you should then develop SBBs for your possible conversions. If you have a technically well-invested plant, but it operates on a declining market, for instance, you may want to convert this plant to make something else. Building blocks here must include the CapEx, fixed and variable cost changes, avoided future CapExes due to the capital spent now instead, etc. Brown greenfields. You should then create SBBs for new lines in existing plants and/or new plants in various locations. Building blocks here must include the CapEx and future CapExes to run the new line or mill, fixed and variable costs, etc. At this stage, do not consider whether any of the above strategic building blocks is good or bad. You do not know that yet, since it is not determined by how they look in isolation. They will all have their respective paybacks if evaluated individually. Some will have a short payback, high NPV or IRR, but that should not be used to base any conclusions upon at this moment. Now, this is where the work will become really interesting. The next step is to create combinations of above SBBs, which we call strategic alternatives, which debottleneckings can be combined with closing a mill, changing capabilities, and adding a line in an existing plant. How do you deal with a growing market? By large debottlenecking projects or greenfields? Or both? And in that case, how should this be implemented over time? How do you deal with a declining market? Line closures, conversions, plant closures? And how should these be prioritized over time? This is an iterative process that must involve the best market technology manufacturing, financial analysis, and management resources. To create a strategic alternative from building blocks in Weissr takes around 5 seconds, and all data from all building blocks are applied. However, each combination of building blocks may need an import from your linear programming tool with the same asset settings regarding capacities and capabilities. If you use such a tool for optimizing production based on manufacturing costs, capabilities, freight, etc., or other adjustments of the raw material situation might be necessary, for instance. Which is the best maximizing long-term cash flow combination of decisions going forward that also makes practical sense and is something that can be implemented by the organization? And that meets financial restrictions, where customers' reactions are acceptable. The number of combinations can be millions in theory, and a tool cannot figure out what are realistic alternatives. It would produce nonsense combinations with great future cash flow. It needs to be an iterative process involving the best expertise in your company. You will come up with one or a handful of combinations, strategic alternatives, that significantly improve your company, where the future long-term cash flow improves significantly. You should expect a 20 to 100% improvement. At this point, you may already see one thing that is really interesting, and that is an important lesson. The alternative that maximizes long-term cash flow is likely to be a combination of strategic building blocks with relatively long paybacks. This is completely in line with what we write about in the document The Tail Wags the Dog, that the paybacks and NPVs, IRRs, etc., calculated in the capital budgeting process are completely irrelevant for improving a whole company's cash flow. Your individual CapEx requests in your capital budget will now have longer paybacks, but your company's cash flow will improve notably. In other words, if you were to neglect the conclusions from the process described here, you would pick the faster payback projects and consequently lower your company cash flow. It is your choice. The built-in sensitivity analyses also on X-rates, presentations, logs, user rights, checks and balances, etc., will provide you with a highly productive and safe environment and becomes your strategic and manufacturing group's common environment for strategy work. We know it is a great tool because we use it ourselves every day in our strategy projects with customers. In the end, every mill will get its CapEx master plan and strategic role that determines how the company should invest it in the future to achieve maximum long-term cash flow for the company. With this as a governing strategy, you can safely continue using your current capital budgeting process. contact us for more information. Thank you for your time.